welcome to NEK VT Rocks. And my guest today is Shaina Kasper from the Toxics Action Center. What is that?
Yeah.
Who is that?
Yeah, so Toxics Action Center has been around since 1987. We got our start coming out of the Woburn contamination crisis in Woburn, Massachusetts, where dozens of kids got leukemia, and unfortunately many of them died because of chemical contamination by W.R. Grace, polluting their well water. And while there were all these scientists who come out and take samples or do studies, and there were all these lawyers who could represent them in court, there was no one who could actually meet with folks in their church basement or in their living room and help them figure out what they wanted to see happen for their community. So that's why we were kind of birthed into being, and we work side by side with community groups that are fighting pollution threats in their neighborhoods.
And that's actually where you and I met.
Yes.
Because we were both involved with the demonstration outside Casella Waste, the landfill.
Yep.
So transitioning from that, you're also coming back here to lead a workshop or presentation on environmental injustice. What's that?
Yeah. That's basically why we're doing this, is to say, what is environmental justice? What does environmental injustice mean in Vermont? This term, environmental justice, means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And there's a long history of organizing around environmental justice across the country and across the globe. And so we want to better define what environmental justice means to Vermonters so that we can help write and enact a policy that would be really meaningful for Vermonters that are fighting pollution threats in their communities as well.
So that's a lot of words.
Yeah. Yep.
A lot of words. How will that impact on the daily lives of people up here in the Northeast Kingdom, where technically we're a sacrifice zone?
Yeah.
We have a whopping great hole. We have a prison and no resources for the people who come out of that prison, which impacts on us.
Yeah.
And we have a landfill that's right into the wetlands and on our lake. And we don't have too many job opportunities or housing, etc. How can this help us?
Yeah. When you go to build a new prison or a new landfill or a new factory, you have to go through getting certain permits in order to get that to be built. And so those permits can look at like the historic, what has been on this land in the past. You can look at, how is this going to impact wetlands, but it doesn't look at how it's impacting, really the people that live here, right? And
Big
so
time.
looking at, the people and the place and being able to have some sort of mechanism, especially for communities like the Northeast Kingdom that are overburdened by a lot of other pollution issues, to say, all right, maybe there's not a policy already there's not a permit that we can go through that can stop this big pollution issue. Like, it checks all of the boxes, you can get the permit, but having an environmental justice policy on the books may be able to help communities, give them another tool in the toolbox if they're concerned about a new proposal being put in.
Right. Could that have helped us when we went up against Act 250 for the landfill expansion?
We don't know what this policy is going to look like yet. That's why we're doing these community panels. Like, we're not, the state doesn't have a policy, and then they go out and they do like listening sessions, public hearings across the state. We want to start 10 steps before that of saying,
actually involve people.
What a concept. to at the very beginning of this process to say, what should this policy cover? What are we looking at? What are the issues that you're facing where people and place intersect? And what are some policy, where there are these loopholes, and what can we help
the state funding any of this?
They're
what a surprise.
They did just get a grant from the EPA in order to support their time working on environmental justice policy for the state, which is a huge step in the right direction.
So they actually understand the term environmental justice.
I mean, yeah, we're working closely with them on this project to help, define what does environmental justice mean in the state, and we have to work really, really closely with them to make sure that the policy that's written is going to be most impactful for people like you,
Right.
and me. Yeah.
Are any of the legislators that you're actually working with from the Northeast Kingdom?
So this is not necessarily going to be a policy like passed through the legislature, signed by the governor. This could also be the Department of Environmental Conservation passing a policy through their or all the other agencies to help them.
Are any of them actually involved?
Yeah, so
that's good.
we're in close communication with the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Department of Health in particular, which makes sense that they would be the most involved, right?
One would hope.
We would hope, and they are,
Yeah.
to make sure that they're at the table during these conversations, but that they're really at the table to listen.
Yeah.
And so we've got this community panel coming up where we want to
That's
hear.
the one here.
That's going to be here
Yeah.
on January 30th at 4 o'clock, or 5 o'clock, I should.
5 o'clock.
Let me double
It's
check
5
as we're
o'clock.
talking. At 5 o'clock at the Gateway Center.
Yeah.
And so there will be some folks from the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Department of Health there, but they'll, unless they live here, they'll just be there to listen and to
Right.
hear,
That's fine.
from
Yeah.
folks about
Do you
what's
know
happening.
who's coming from those?
I don't
departments?
remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some of them have just been here. We just had a big deal meeting with legislators from both sides of
That's
the
right.
lake.
Yeah.
And some of DEC was here for that. So
Yeah.
some of them have already been going to here.
Yeah, yeah. But we're hoping too that this won't just be, we're hoping people come with their issue that they're really concerned about. We met about the landfill issue.
Right.
But also that folks will come who have never heard about what environmental justice means
Right.
before, and or don't necessarily think that they're facing an environmental injustice, but hopefully as being part of the conversation, you
Right.
can say, oh yeah, like my landlord never dealt with that mold issue in my
Right.
building. What's that about?
Or how about just the lack of housing,
Oh, sure,
which
yeah.
is massive up here.
Yeah, yeah. Or we were just talking before about an oil bill that was, through the roof, and how does
Yes.
that impact your life?
Right.
What are some potential solutions to these problems that you're facing? So whether that's
Right.
a big thing that you're working on already, like
Yeah.
fighting landfill contamination into your
Yes.
drinking water, or if it's if you haven't thought about it yet, we want to hear from you.
Yeah. So people who will come, I gather there's food to start off with. That
Yeah.
always brings people in.
Hopefully, yeah. It's going to be at the Gateway Center.
Yeah.
There'll be dinner a little bit beforehand, starting at 5, but
Yeah.
you can come anytime until food runs out.
Yeah.
And then we'll also have childcare and $20 to participants.
That's great.
To be able to
I mean,
encourage folks to come out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's been quite a lot of advertising for this. I've sort of seen it a lot going around on
Great.
social media and in other places. So what sort of format can people expect?
Yeah, we'll have a little bit of overview about why we're doing this project and kind of the history of this project. And then we're going to open it up and pose a couple of questions, have some small group discussions, and we'll have a bunch of volunteers around the room frantically taking notes to capture everything that people are saying.
Yeah.
But it's really just going to be having conversations over dinner. And hopefully that'll be a great way to have people share their stories and
Right.
experiences.
Are you doing this at other places in the state too?
We are. We did one in Rutland in the fall. This is the second one. We're planning one in Burlington in a couple of weeks, and then in Bennington a few weeks after that.
That's great.
And then there's more in the works, but those are the
Yeah.
only ones that are really moving
Yeah.
at this
I mean,
point.
so often the Northeast Kingdom gets excluded. The focus is always on Chittenden County. and
Burlington, Montpelier.
very rarely up here. So it's a big deal that you're actually considering us.
Well, and we're really hoping to center the perspectives of folks who, based on our data and just from the numbers, are hardest hit by environmental threats.
Right.
And so unfortunately that means we need folks from the Northeast Kingdom to be actively involved in making sure that this policy works for you.
Right. And I guess the hardest part is sort of explaining what an environmental threat is, because it's really easy to hear well, there's climate change. Yes.
Sure.
But
how is climate change affecting you?
Right. And the
That's
answer is
such
we
a big
don't.
question.
Yes, but we don't know that, most of us. Up here, our problems are more immediate. Like, I can't afford gas to put in my car, even if I should be or shouldn't be putting gas in my car, because that's not helping the environment. But I have no choice but to drive 50 miles to work, because that's the only place I can get a job. And oh, by the way, I'm working for peanuts. I can't afford rent. So there are just so many issues.
Yeah, and that's there's so many ways that we could take having these conversations, and we're leaving that up to you guys. But from my perspective, my dad got diagnosed with Lyme disease a couple of years ago and got really, really sick and knocked him out for a long time. And that's a climate change issue. We never had ticks growing up. And now
they're everywhere.
I'm pulling them off every time I go
Isn't that
outside.
wonderful?
It's horrible. And so, just to hear about what issues people are facing, and then oftentimes it is connected to where you live and the environment that you live in. And that's how the world works.
It is. And Vermont in some ways Vermont is beautiful. We have water here, which many of the other states don't. But if we don't look at the pollution in our water, or understand that we have problems with our water, some of which are from natural contaminants like arsenic. I mean, it's hard to think of arsenic as a natural contaminant.
But from the rock.
But it is. But then there are all the others, and it's how we factor those in. Or how we even begin to have the conversations.
And it's about our water that we drink, but also the water that we recreate in. And it's about the air we breathe in our homes and in our communities.
We see the water, but we don't see the air.
Totally. And the food we, if we're trying to eat more locally or drink local milk, what is impacting that? It's what are the mosquitoes that are biting us? It's everything.
And we have lots of those. We'd like to think of them as tropical insects, but sorry, they're everywhere.
There's a lot of ways to think about what is your environment, and I think often you can think about the environment as this nature. You go out into the woods, you go out for a canoe, you go out into the environment. When really, everything that we do is interacting with the environment. And so that's really what the history of the term environmental justice comes from. And it's saying, no matter, where you are, there's a history of people in that place. And you have to be sure to acknowledge that, and not just this the Yosemite, natural world as
and
separate
tying
from
it
people.
into things like food insecurity, which again is very real up here. Vermont is trying to, again, put a policy in that will enable every child to have breakfast and lunch at school. And it's sort of hard to think, why is anybody even arguing against that? But they are. But food insecurity is real, but if you don't feed kids, then they don't learn, and then you get adults who, it just goes on and on, the vicious cycle.
It's not even about learning, it's about
surviving.
Every kid, deserves to have, food.
And that shouldn't even be a question.
Exactly,
But it is, and when you look at the history of Vermonters who grew up growing their own, but when you move into a sort of urban, relatively speaking, setting, I mean, we're not urban, whichever way you look at us, but...
It's a pretty big city, Newport, no?
Well, 4,500 people.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not that big, it really isn't. But how do you grow your own to supplement the food that you're getting? We have communities around here who have no access to fresh food. So, for example, the local town, small town, where the only store closed.
Yeah.
There's now a Dollar General, but there's nothing fresh there.
Yeah.
And do you really want that canned stuff?
Well, yeah. I mean, where do you do your grocery shopping,
Well,
and how
isn't
has
anyway.
that changed?
If you don't have a car, because we have
Yeah.
no transportation.
No public
Yay.
transportation. These are all really critical issues
Yeah.
that, I think we're kind of just touching on a little bit of a lot of different issues, but hopefully this will, spark other questions or ideas from audience members to be able to come and dive into, that issue that is such a pain. If you have to, get a ride from a neighbor in order to go grocery shopping.
Right. And a lot of people do.
Oh yeah, like how does that affect what you buy and how
Big time.
how you right.
And you have to give your neighbor something, obviously, for taking you.
Exactly. Yeah.
And your income is so limited anyway.
And so, I live in Montpelier now, and I think a lot of folks in Montpelier may think that they know what the answers are to these questions.
Yeah, right.
Or think that they might have some, good ideas about how to solve these problems that you all are facing.
Yes.
But
Just pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, please.
But we want to, we know that's not, you guys probably know the let me phrase this a different way. You know what's best for your community and for the
Yes.
problems that you're facing. And so what are the solutions that you're seeing? Yeah. And want to propose to
Right.
policymakers down in Montpelier.
And how do you support small businesses who at this point are struggling to pay minimum wage for their employees, but minimum wage doesn't let anybody live? You can't pay rent on minimum wage.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's so interconnected. Yeah.
Right.
And paying
And
for
I think
gas to go
that's-
to your job and
Right,
everything
that's
else.
really the hard part of all of this. How do you tease the parts so that they separate, so that you have an entry point? Because if you try and jump into the middle, it's totally overwhelming.
Sure. Yeah. And there are a lot of smart, academics and policymakers that we're working with on this project that can take all of these different stories and
Right.
experiences and be able to find some trends and synthesize all of this information. So we're working with University of Vermont, Rubenstein Schools, and Vermont Law School's new Environmental Justice Clinic, along with another organization called Center for Whole Communities. So these four organizations, and Toxics Action Center, these four organizations are working together to do a bunch of just quantitative research. So just looking at the numbers of who lives where and what the data can show us. They're looking at, we're going door to door and doing, 700 surveys around the state, knocking on doors, asking people some of these questions that we'll discuss in the panels, doing these series of community panels, and looking at what other states have done and what that's meant for the, most impacted communities in those states. So, Massachusetts passed an environmental justice policy a couple of years ago. How's that working for them? So, looking at what's working, what's not working in other states. And we're hoping that through all of these different things, we'll be able to write and implement a really meaningful policy to help address a lot of these questions.
At the risk of sounding incredibly cynical,
Go. I'm right there with you.
we are so over policies. We are so over surveys. We have a gargantuan shelf of them in this town where, quote, well-paid experts have come in, offered their opinions, involved us briefly, written their fabby proposals, and they're all sitting on a shelf and diddly squat changes. And anytime an idea comes up, it's, let's do another consultant-led, very expensive consultant-led survey. I happen to know you're not a very expensive consultant, because that's not your privilege.
We do our work for free. We
do.
work with community groups for free.
So there's a difference there. But what never comes from any of this is engagement of community. Communities can frequently help themselves, help each other. But there's never anything about building community, about building on the strengths that are there. If anything, we get pushed apart.
So, say more about that. How do you get pushed apart by these proposals?
Because we are told that experts have all the answers and we should do what the experts say.
Yeah.
So, for example, yet another of these events, what the community really wanted was a community centre. Well, that got totally blown off and has been blown off consistently. But you know, that's how you get people to come together and organize.
Sure.
In case you didn't know that.
I know.
You're a
so
grassroots
amazing.
organizer,
Yeah.
you know that.
Yeah.
Most academics are not grassroots organizers, and they sit in their, I'm not going to say ivory towers, because I don't think most of them are that grandiose, but they certainly sit in their towers unimpacted by the day-to-day living of many other people. And it's really hard. I think what would help Newport is if there could actually be a real meaningful meeting
Yeah.
between the tower and the rest of us riffraff.
Yeah.
We have been called riffraff.
Oh, golly, yeah. We will be coming back once we have, you know, a draft policy. You know, the state will do a series of public hearings and conversations to say, you know, here's what we're proposing. What do you think of this?
Yeah.
And that'll really be the opportunity to get into some of that nitty gritty, and that's where they might say, you know, we're proposing this based on our research. This is what we're going to be proposing. And you might say, that is not going to work for Newport. But at this point, we're really just starting with just having some of these community conversations to be able to help, you know, we have an agreement with the Department of Environmental Conservation where they're gonna really hear what comes out of the series of community conversations across the state, and to look at this information to be able to best inform a new proposal to bring forth to the table. And then I'll just say at Toxics Action Center, we a lot of what we do is networking these community groups that are fighting pollution threats in their neighborhoods with scientists and technical experts and professionals and lawyers and academics, to be able to make sure that both sides are actually hearing what's needed from the other side as well.
And that's a really important role, because it's so hard to have those conversations.
It's still, I've been doing this for a while, and it's still really hard.
We speak very different languages.
Exactly, and have different goals.
Right.
And so, when academics are coming in saying, I need to do this research in order to get published, in order to further my career, that's
nice.
And then the community saying, we need to slow this process down in order to make sure we're talking to the right people. Those are at odds. And so we often find ourselves in that role of being able to the go-between.
Yeah, exactly. We forget that where we stand on the circle of life, the view is different.
Wait,
but it's the same circle.
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
Well, if I'm standing in Newport looking at inadequate housing, food insecurity, and a whopping great hole, that's very different from somebody standing in Montpelier looking at building a tourist industry. That doesn't help me put food on the table, find childcare for my kids so that I can actually get a job, if I can find one that pays more than peanuts. That doesn't, but it's the same circle.
Yeah.
We're saying the view is gorgeous, except...
The view of the whole.
It's somehow, how do we bring that circle to be able to understand what the view is like elsewhere in the circle.
And I'll say, we're all, I really do believe that we're all just, humans trying to do our best in the world, you know? And so the, policymakers in Montpelier are, they're trying their best to, they're saying, oh my gosh, we're the only state in the region that doesn't have an environmental justice policy on the books. Let's write an environmental justice policy. Let's go do it. And they're That's how, their thinking is how they're going to best support this work. And so we're saying, stop, not yet, please. Let's make sure that it's what people want and what people need.
The good news up here is, again, this is true for the whole of Vermont. We're a very small state. We're geographically pretty big, but our population is smaller than so many cities, the total population. And we all know our legislators. We know them because we farm on the next farm, or they're at the same pizza joint as we are, but we know each other. And that's both effective and ineffective sometimes, because, you can be the same person moaning and groaning, or you can be just the same opinion.
Or you can run. And
that's right.
Yeah,
exactly.
There's a lot of different ways of making change, and I think, in Vermont, we're really blessed to be able to have that direct communication with people who can, change the policies that are on the books that affect our day-to-day lives. So let's use that opportunity.
And to have the perspective that if the butterfly flaps its wings up here, that has an impact down in Bennington. If Bennington's corrupted water supply leaches further, that will impact on other communities too. Issues are not separate. So what happens up here has an impact elsewhere, and vice versa. We tend to separate ourselves.
And I mean, I think you're seeing that really clearly with this landfill issue that you're fighting across national borders. But it's all
the same.
All the same water. It's
all
it's different states, different countries, different policies, obviously, but the issue that you're facing is exactly the same.
And it doesn't matter if your water flows north as ours does or south. We're all needing that same water. And we can't survive without it. But it's not just the water, obviously. It's more than that.
I mean, I'm really excited for this panel in a couple of weeks to say, what are we not even thinking of asking? Of, at Toxic Action Center, we work with a lot of communities that are fighting a lot of different types of pollution threats in their neighborhoods. But what are the things that we haven't even heard about yet, or we haven't worked with a community group on, or is something that is really just a household, you think maybe just a household issue, but not until you get into a room and you're hearing that
it's a household issue for everybody,
exactly, that you can then get together and work together on that locally if you want, or you can just come and get a dinner and complain about your issue, get $20 and share about what are the issues that you're dealing with, and go along your merry way.
Most people
works.
Don't just want to complain about their issues. They want change, and they want to be a part of change. And sometimes it's hard to figure out how to be a part of that change in a positive way.
Well, we're hoping that folks will come with ideas too. So I've heard from you already today of raising the minimum wage, getting transportation more affordable, getting more public transportation. There's a lot of different solutions that you may not think are necessarily environmental solutions, but very much are interconnected.
And it's like the political and the personal. If we think about environment as in the global sense, but also my environment, where am I living or not living? Am I couch surfing? Or living in my car or in a tent in the summer, which is true for so many.
So want to hear from everyone. It'll be great.
It really will. And I assume you've asked some of the schools.
Yes, I think you've connected us, I believe, or or
somebody
I can't remember who did. Mostly the like local public schools.
In a lot of ways, the school kids are the canaries in the mine. They really are. And they're both seeing it, experiencing it. And if there's a way of getting kids involved, because they have such great ideas, because they ask the questions that adults don't even think of.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we've been seeing that so much the past couple of years with the, so many, the young people are leading the way on finding the solutions. And so we really need to, hear from the youth and to be able to respond to their questions and their ideas in a meaningful way. So we on our we're going to offer childcare, but that it's not just babysitting. We're really actually going to be asking kids to participate in this process of what does what are the environmental issues that you're facing? What is your community's concerns, and how are you, what solutions do you want to bring to the table? So in effect,
there's going to be a kids group too.
Yeah, we're really excited.
Great.
Yeah.
That's really great.
Yeah, this is again our second community panel, and the first one we didn't have that, and we realized what a huge missed opportunity that was. So this is going to be a new
well, that actually is the most exciting thing about this for me.
Yeah.
Because that's where I think that the obvious questions that the rest of us have totally forgotten about.
Yeah, right.
That's where they'll come from.
Because you're just dealing with it every day. You don't think about it. And kids can say, yeah, how come it takes us an hour and a half to get to school in the morning? What the heck?
What clueless person said that school should start at 8 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, exactly.
When my biological clock doesn't wake up till 10.
Yeah. So many questions.
Unfortunately, we are now out
already.
Of time. I know,
my
I told
goodness.
it goes really fast.
Jabber away.
So, thank you so much for coming. I'm really looking forward to this meeting. And can people contact you?
Yeah, so we'll be posting these flyers around town.
Okay.
If you also, the project is called Rejoice, Rural Environmental Justice Opportunities Informed by Community Expertise. But if you just look on Facebook for Rejoice NEK, there's more information about the upcoming panel. And then you can always just look up Toxics Action Center as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.